You know, cases seem boring, but they hold all your crap and you gotta look at it. So we're gonna look at it today.
Bring your setup to the next level with Cable Mod's all-new custom coiled keyboard cables. Available in a variety of colors and connector types utilizing best-in-class connectors, the keyboard cables give your setup a look and feel it deserves. To see the complete lineup of custom keyboard cables available from Cable Mod, click the link in the description below.
So we're gonna look at the new Pure Bass 500DX from Be Quiet. It's been out for a little bit here. It's kind of interesting. First of all, it's a mid-tower case, but Be Quiet has always been pretty adamant about making the most silent cases that they can. And typically, when you focus on silence, you have to make a decision of whether or not it's going to be, silent or have good airflow. Because the problem is, if you have a case that has tons of ventilation and such, then oftentimes, you're gonna be able to hear the fans and stuff through that. So what, silent optimized cases tend to have is a lot of insulation on the side panels, maybe not glass, not as much cooling in mind, just silence, but you don't tend to get a great cooling case when you have to make that choice. Well, Be Quiet has really just decided to kind of make more of a hybrid case here, where it's kind of got the best of both features. So it's gonna have tons of mesh, it's gonna have some insulation on the side panel, it's going to have enough room to fit your modern components. Remember, if you're running modern CPUs, they can get pretty toasty, so you want to have plenty of fans, possibly an AIO or a big tower cooler. If you're running modern graphics cards, they're even toastier. So, there's a lot of choices that you have to make when it comes to designing a case. And also keeping it affordable. Now, we'll go ahead and start with the price. This one right now on Amazon here in the US is running about $106. You'll find prices sort of vary depending on the retailer. They're available in white, they're available in black. So let's go ahead and start with the top here. You can see we have a mesh grill. It's easy to pop off. It says Be Quiet on it. You just got it from the back right here and it'll come off. It's magnetic. So I personally am not a fan of top mesh like this, only because if you're using exhaust fans there, you don't have to worry about it sucking dust in. Dust could potentially land there, but when you turn on the system and fans blow, the dust will come off. So this might somewhat hinder your exhaust airflow. I know it's pretty unscientific, but I can actually, just with a light breath, feel air through it, so it's probably gonna be just fine. Room on top for a 240 or 280 or two 120s or two 140 millimeter fans. Looking at the front, you can also see we've got our mesh material going all the way through, but it's not flat. You see how it's kind of got this curve? And my desk is, I was like, what is it rocking on? Here is the manual that comes with. The front here isn't just a flat piece of mesh. As you can see, it's kind of got this curve to it. And what that does is that increases the volume of air right in front of the fan. So by doing that and having all this mesh, it means plenty of airflow. There's a volume of air right in front of the fan blades to utilize, helping vacuum. So as air is moving, air is going to pull other air with it. So the fans are moving the air, and by having a larger volume right in front of the fans means you're going to have additional pressure, or you can overcome the pressure and have better static pressure moving through this grill. So the front pops off to access your filters and stuff. It's also got contact pins right here because the front does have an RGB strip right here. So these two lines are actually an RGB strip. So you can plug these into your motherboard or RGB fan controller if it utilizes the same pin type, and then you'll have lighting on the front of your case. This is also how you can access your fan filter right here, which comes off that way. So you got these two little tabs, and then it does have a magnet, which just magnetizes right here. So you can keep everything nice and dust free. It does come included with one Pure Wings fan right here, Pure Wings 2, which is their newer fan. So it is a 140 millimeter. It is airflow optimized. It's also silent optimized by having these ridges on the blades, and the motor type and bearing type keep it extremely quiet. On the front, button-wise, you can see we have a USB 3.1, USB 3.0, power, microphone, headphone, and RGB button. So there is no dedicated reset button, just a power button. But this is a button here to control the lighting, because this case Does have its own RGB controller. If for some reason you put a motherboard in here that's maybe older, doesn't have RGB control, you can still just set that up to SATA power and then use that button to cycle through the different lighting modes. The back panel, as you can see, does have some of that sound insulationing, the sound insulation panel that I've already kind of talked about. Typically the silent optimized fans would have very thick panels full of this stuff everywhere. It's on the back panel, but clearly it's not on the front panel because the front panel is tempered glass. There is also a protective film on the glass, so if it looks cloudy to you, it's because there is film on both sides of this glass. So we'll set this someplace safe. All right, so we do have compartmentalized shroud happening right here, but you can see we also have full perforation. So it makes it look nicer in terms of your cables and such being hidden down here and not seeing the side of your power supply. However, if for some reason you want to flip your power supply over so the fan is drawing from inside the chassis rather than underneath, let's say you're putting it on carpet or something like that, you don't want to be sucking up dirt and dust and stuff that settles down in carpet. So you can flip the fan over and it will pull it from the main chamber of air. We have another Pure Wings 2 right here on the back, another 140 millimeter fan. So you do get two 140 millimeter Pure Wings 2 fans, which are not cheap. A lot of cases come with like the cheapest bargain fan that they can get manufactured that looks like their company's brand, but really it's just junk. This is the actual same retail Pure Wings 2 that you would get if you were to just go out and buy these. They're also similar fans to what you find on like their air coolers and stuff. We also have another one right here on the top. So we've got two exhaust fans, one intake fan. Personally, if I were gonna be using this case right now and configuring it, I would move the either the rear fan or the top fan to the front. I would rather have two intake fans on the front supplying cold air or fresh air to the system and one exhaust fan. That way we just have positive pressure in the chassis, which means that if we have more exhausting than we have intaking, it's gonna pull in air through any gaps that are in the chassis. It's gonna bypass the filters wherever the path of least resistance is, which means you could have dust kind of circumventing the filters altogether. So I would probably personally put a second fan on the front, single exhaust fan. Ideally, I'd get another Pure Wings 2, put it on the front, two intake, two exhaust, and it'd be about a fairly balanced airflow. Now you can see here, we've got this kind of a chamber that is removable. So there are thumb screws on the back of this. And let me go ahead and take it off. This is a mount where you can mount two 2.5-inch SSDs right here. So you can mount two SSDs or small hard drives, I think SSD obviously. You got a little pass-through deal right here with the Be Quiet logo where you could put some filters, not just filters, but plugs to the SSDs. If you want them to show on this side, you can do that. But it's got this kind of a little bit of an L bend, and that's gonna help keep your cables hidden when you come around to your motherboard. You have this channel right here where my fingers are to hide some of the wires. Now, if you're gonna be running a big power supply, let's say you're running a 3080 Ti or 3090 in here and you get like a 1200 watt, big giant power supply that's not necessarily needed, but you went with overkill. Those plugs tend to be thick and you don't have a lot of room right here to make that kind of a 180 degree bend or a 90 degree bend from the upward angle. So you definitely want to keep this in mind. Oftentimes it'd be easier to pop this off, run your cables, sort of train them, and then try and get this piece back on rather than trying to feed them through here. But in terms of feeding wires, we have cable ties everywhere on the backside of this chassis, so we can zip tie or Velcro down our wires to keep them sort of hidden. You can see we've already got 1, 2, 3, 4 included Velcro wires here with our front panel connectors. Speaking of front panel connector, here is our USB 3.1 plug right there. This is our input to the RGB controller. The RGB controller that I mentioned is ARGB, so you can see you have a 3-pin here. Plug this into your motherboard. HD audio. I wish that they would still just make these with black instead of these colored cables. This is if you're gonna use the front side audio. I tend to not use any of that. These cables are not very shielded, and as they run past power, you get a lot of crackling and popping in your headphones when you plug them into the front. So if you've ever been sitting there plugging your headphones into your case and you're like, man, why is my noise floor all crackly and stuff in my headphones? Typically it's because these wires, these cables are not shielded very well. And if they run past anything, they'll pick up RF or EMF and just play that to your headphones, and it kind of stinks. We have a black single ribbon, pretty flexible USB 3.0. I feel like these cables are finally nice right around the time they're towards end of life. Because now with everything being 3.1, USB-C and all that, eventually we won't have too many of these anymore. And it's right around the time that they finally are manageable without being big, giant, thick cables to where you're not gonna use them anymore. And then we just have our power LED, our LED power header and our power button header. So pretty easy cables to manage here. On the back side too, as you can see right here, this is removable. So when you're going to install your motherboard, you can access the bracket easily for whatever your cooler type is. But you can take this off, mount a couple of SSDs, fan controllers, Arduino, whatever, something to this, and then put it back in here when you're done installing your motherboard. So this way you don't have to necessarily install your cooler on the motherboard and then put the motherboard in. That makes it difficult to get to these top screws. So having an access panel here is very important. In terms of hardware and such, it's gonna be pretty basic. Motherboard screws, some fan screws, the little motherboard adapter there so you can tighten or remove any of the standoffs, so this just terminates to a standard Phillips, and then SSD screws and stuff. Very basic, nothing to really talk about there. If you are still running a 3.5-inch spinning drive, you do have a sled right here or a tray that allows for 2 to be mounted. If you're not gonna be using it at all, it is removable, which means if you wanted to do a water loop or something in here, you can do that, because if you're gonna be running a bigger radiator, so you can fit a 360 on the front technically, as you can see right here, it comes all the way to the bottom. You'll have to remove this, because if I put it back in there, you'll see that interferes with that particular area. So you could run a 240 up in here, but if you wanna run a 360 or probably even a 280, depending, you'll have to remove this and give up your 3.5-inch drives. But that gives you plenty of room on the inside, as you can see, with this cutout to run a 360 rad and still have room for a pump or a reservoir, tubing, and your long graphics card. Speaking of graphics cards, so that loosens up right there. You can access the screws to remove your graphics card or expansion slots, tighten that back down. I guess it just makes it look a little nicer in the back. No vertical mount in this one. No provisions for vertical mount either. You can see there's no screws or anything down here or holes to be able to mount a vertical mount. So if you wanted to vertical mount in this, you'd have to get one of the third-party vertical mount adapters that basically attaches to your expansion slots here, has a riser cable, goes into your motherboard, and then it'll mount like that. Keep in mind though, that puts all the weight back here. This metal in the back of these cases tends to not be the thickest, so you might have some flex and some flimsiness to it without there being any sort of support underneath. So if you're gonna do that, I'd still find a way to have something underneath here to support the actual, vertical weight of that graphics card without just putting it all back here. Let's go ahead and see how much room we have for graphics cards here. So this is a 3080 Ti Tough. It's a fairly long graphics card. So as you can see, if I line that up right around where it would go, if you're gonna run a long graphics card like this, as you can see, you're not left with a whole lot of room for a front radiator and reservoir. Now you could easily fit a radiator there, but in terms of, because the fans go on this side, so the 25mm thickness for the fans is occupied in front. You could easily run up to a 45mm thick radiator right here, but you're gonna have to end up having some sort of a basement pump or something like that. You wouldn't be able to just mount a pump to the radiator because there's not a whole lot of room right there. But it's one of those things where if you're gonna go giant card like this, you're going to, on a mid-tower chassis, you're going to lose some depth for your graphics card. So the fact that I can fit the Tough Gaming, which is almost one of the longest cards that we have. I think the MSI Gaming X Trio might be the longest card we have. I believe the Galax is like one of the longest cards on the market, like the Hall of Fame. But we don't have those cards, so I can't actually show you the depth. But you can fit any graphics card you want in here with still being able to fit 3 fans in the front. It's only if you're gonna go with like a radiator where it starts to matter. And I still believe you'd be able to fit a 30mm rad on here, which is just about what all AIOs are. If you want a 360mm radiator mounted to the front for your AIO, rather than going 240 or 280 on the top, you'd still be able to fit pretty much the longest graphics card in here and not have to sacrifice anything there. In terms of radiators on the top though, however, there's not a whole lot of room between where the top of the motherboard goes right here and where the radiator will hang down. To account for that, we do have it offset. So you can see how the holes are moved towards the glass. What that allows you to do is if you're gonna have a radiator hanging down, because you're gonna have fans and radiator mounted underneath. So you've got 25 mil thickness for the fans. Let's go with a 15 mil fan, but I still think for radiators you should go with 25. And at least a 30 millimeter radiator, you got 55 millimeters of drop right here. And that's gonna overhang in front of your EPS powers for your motherboard. It's gonna overhang in front of your VRMs and all that. Little build tip, if you're gonna do that and you're gonna put an AIO or something here, put your motherboard in, plug in your EPS cables, any fan cables or anything you need at the top of the motherboard first. Or you will be putting in your AIO, trying to plug that in, realizing you can't reach it because it's all covered by the stuff hanging down. Then you'll be taking your AIO out and plugging all that in, going, why didn't I think of this before? I still do it to this day where I block it and then go, dang it, why didn't I pre-wire all that? So a little build tip with smaller chassis like this that have overhang and offset, that have a motherboard that still go pretty high up near the top. So it's a fairly straightforward chassis, but it comes from a manufacturer that is known for build quality. It's known for its performance, both in silence and airflow. Like these fans right here, one of the most recent fans we've used from Be Quiet were their new RGB fans, the Pure Lights. And it was just like, oh my goodness, the amount of airflow and lack of turbulent wind choppy noise and motor hum was absolutely insane. Even when I would add them to a radiator or something to add some turbulence, they were extremely quiet. So it's no surprise that the new PureBase 500DX is gonna deliver a really good balance between noise optimization and airflow. There's not a whole lot to talk about, but you know what? This is an area where we feel like a lot of people have been kind of focusing lately is, as components were difficult to get your hands on, which not so much anymore. You can actually get your hands on components now without it costing an arm and a leg. I think people were spending a lot of time trying to upgrade things that they could, like their cases and their keyboards and their mice and their monitors and stuff that they interact with every single day. I mean, the case, heck, I know people that are like, just throw it in a cardboard box as long as it works, I don't care. And that's fine too. But for those of you that do care, but at the same time don't want to break the bank, the $100 price point for cases is pretty exciting, especially if you consider what you could get for $100 just 5 years ago. You know, they would still be steel colored inside. You wouldn't have a white or a black option. There certainly wouldn't be any sort of case lighting, and it wouldn't come with 3 premium fans in it. So if you just take into account the price of these fans alone, if you go buy 3 of them, you realize what a bargain this case actually is. So anyway, huge thanks to Be Quiet for sending us this case to take a look at. You guys can find the link down below where you can go and check out all the specs, all the features, all of the size fitment stuff, how much vertical height you have for your coolers. It's gonna fit a lot of components in there, and there's so much ventilation that you're not gonna find that you're choking off any of those components in terms of airflow and cooling because of the fact that it has all of it. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Do you care about cases, or are you the kind of person that's just like, again, cut some holes in a cardboard box and staple some fans to it? I'm fine. I'm not that way. I mean, obviously, you guys see my builds. I'm a case snob, but I could build in this and be happy.